Everyone else have a great class.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Felicia. Thank you so much it's always a joy to get to work with you here in the Michaels Community Classroom. Thank you for the time that you get to spend with us. Andy and I are thrilled to be here, and this class is going to be such a fun, quick lesson in just about an hour. And I know you don't necessarily need to be introduced, Andy, but please, everyone, allow me to introduce you to Andy Jones. He will be our lead teacher today. And Andy, I just want to share with you that as I've been watching all of our friends join in the class today, we have so many friends with us today from our Let's Paint with Plaid community. So thank you, everyone, for your fellowship and for joining in our classes. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Jones. If you have questions, type them out in the chat and I'll see if I can do my best to answer them for you. Have a good time, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you are with us to create pumpkin painting here for what I like to refer to as pumpkin season. So this particular class that we're doing is a little bit of a moody pumpkin, and I chose to paint it on a linen canvas, which gives a rich, wonderful background to our painting. It's much more, it's just a beautiful background color to paint on, and it doesn't look like any kind of paint or stain or any other kind of treatment you can give to a canvas. So it's just uniquely beautiful, and I absolutely adore painting on a linen canvas. So if you opted to paint on a different kind of canvas, that's perfectly fine. Just keep in mind that you are going to have a very different result than those who are painting along on a linen canvas. So having said that, my particular canvas is ready to go. I have my pattern transferred to the surface using gray artist transfer paper. So I'll show you up close that all my lines are there. It's a pretty simple painting. We've got a pumpkin, we've got a stem, and we've got a pumpkin leaf. So that's where we are. And I'm going to try to do this in a very methodical way so that you can all work along with me. We can all keep up together and we'll all finish in just about an hour. So I am going to put two colors on my palette. The first color is going to be Thicket. And somebody was asking if they can paint on a piece of paper, and you can, but remember, everything is going to be a little different. It's going to have a different look, it's going to have a different feel, and the paint will behave differently on paper than it does on canvas. All right, so I've just put out Thicket and Burnt Umber on my palette, and that's where we're going to start. And I am going to be using a big 1-inch flat brush. You do not want to use a small brush. Do not send a boy to do a man's job. We've got a lot of area to cover here in the background. And so we need a big brush and not a little tiny brush. All right, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of Thicket on my big 1-inch paintbrush. And I'm not picking up too much Thicket, but I am going to, let me bring this in so you can see I've got a basin of water here, and I'm just going to stick the corner of the brush into the water. So I'm thinning out my Thicket just a little bit so that it's just a little soupy, just a little juicy. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to hold your paintbrush. Put the tip of the handle in the palm of your hand and then grab the brush. You want to hold your brush that far back on the handle. I'm not near the ferrule. If you are used to holding your paintbrush like a pencil, that's probably where you hold it. But for this afternoon's class, handle in the palm of your hand, then grasp the brush. Now we are going to use not only the flat surface of our paintbrush, but we are also going to use the corner. So I'm going to put the corner of the brush down on my canvas, and I'm just going to fill in this area between the leaf and the pumpkin. And it's not perfectly filled in, it's just kind of getting some color on the canvas, and you can see through this color. It's not 100% opaque. Not picking up any more paint, and I'm going to scrub a little bit of this green on. Some of it's going into the leaf, some of it's going into the stem. I'm only concerned about what it looks like at this outside edge. And I want a very moody little painting here. So again, still scrubbing on the corner, and we're scrubbing some of this out, and we're looking mainly for interesting edges, and it shows up very well on the monitor that let me move this out of the way. I'm not trying to paint, let me get a little more painting. I'm not trying to paint straight lines like that or another straight line. This is lots of kind of scrubbing and creating an interesting shape. All right, so I'm carrying this right along the left side of the pumpkin and spreading it out a little bit. We're not done. This is just the very beginning of what we're doing. So picking up a very sparse amount of paint, and I'm going to start next to the pumpkin and the leaf, and I'm carrying this out just a little bit. Scrub, scrub, scrub. This outside edge is what is most important to me. Want it very moody, very loose, very, the correct term is very painterly. So it's not sloppy, it's not messy, it's painterly. All right, so we're gonna all do that. I'm gonna give you a minute to do that. And while you all are scrubbing on this very sparse amount of Thicket, I'm gonna dry my canvas. Okay, I didn't have much paint on the canvas, so mine is already dry. So step one, done. So I'm going to give you one more minute to do this on your painting, and then we will be ready to move on to step two. So I was going to say take your time, but make sure to go ahead and move pretty quickly, move along with us, and you'll be just fine. So still have a moment to catch up with step one. And I'm going to bring this up close to the camera. I want you to see that you can still see the canvas through all of this paint. We're not getting a solid coverage on there. It's very transparent, very small amount of paint. All right, I'm going to pick up a little bit more Thicket, and I'm going to pick up a little burnt umber on the brush at the same time and just brush mix this together so that we make a dark green brown color, or a dark brown green color, depending on how yours works out. One of the most important rules for one of my classes is you have to remember that you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. So everybody's is going to look a little different, and that's perfect. So I'm going to take the paint that's on my brush, I'm going to stick the corner of my brush into a little water. So I'm going to thin this paint down just so that it's juicy and that it flows. And I'm going to probably blot a little bit of that off on my shop towel, just because I don't want too much on my brush. Now, once again, resting the tip of the handle in the palm of my hand, and then grasping the brush, holding it as far back as I can. And once again, we're going to be using the corner of the flat brush. And we're going to start in the same place that we did before, right underneath the leaf next to the stem and the pumpkin. And I'm looking at mine, and mine is a little bit it's too green for me. So I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber to this just to make it a little bit more brown. And you can't really decide that until you've got a little paint on the canvas. So then again, using the corner of the brush, we're just going to scrub a little bit of this on. I've got way too much paint on my brush, way too much paint. So I'm wiping the excess off on my shop towel, and I will now take this virtually dry brush. I'm going to scrub and scooch some of this color out. Take that brown color again, start around the same areas that we did before, but I'm not going out as far. I'm not covering up all of that green that I put on the first time. So there's where my one color stops and the other one is further out. And we're going to do the same thing down and around this portion of the pumpkin. So Thicket and burnt umber, small amounts of paint, really small amount of paint. Scrub next to the pumpkin, scrub, scrub, scrub. And then we are in a painterly fashion, stretching this paint out to create this wonderful, very moody background behind our pumpkin. All right, so that's what we've got going on right now. So very painterly background, very, very smoky effect. And I'll give you a moment to do that because I know you've had to mix a color, test it, adjust it, and then get your background on there. So a lot going on, I know, and I'm willing to give you a minute to get it done. So I love, 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 love painting pumpkins. Every different size, shape, color, you name it, I am in love with some pumpkins. So this is a really fun project, a fun way to paint a pumpkin. And we're just getting some of this very loose background in.
Andy, we have a request to see your work a little bit closer, please.
There you go, up close and personal. And it looks just as bad as you think yours looks. I used to teach a lot of in-person classes, and a number of times somebody would say, can you come check the way this looks? I think it looks really bad. And I would bring my painting around and I'm like, yep, it looks just as bad as mine does. So you're absolutely where you ought to be. All right, so here we go with our next step. So I'm taking that same color that we just did our background on, and I'm going to start here in the bottom right of the canvas. And I'm going to need a little bit more paint on my brush. So I'm going to pick up a little more Thicket and a little more burnt umber and working this color into my brush. And I needed paint on my brush, but I don't want much. So I'm going to wipe some of that excess off. And I just want to scooch this up and come kind of up these little the little sections of the pumpkin, and then just kind of mess around a little bit. So cover the next section. Not much paint on my brush. You can still see it's pretty light there, but just kind of mess it around a little bit so it's not a solid line. Scrubbing this on at the bottom, bringing some of this dark color up into the main section of the pumpkin. But what we're doing now is establishing the shadowing that's going to be on our pumpkin. So we gotta have some dark so our highlights show up. You can't have beautiful highlights in a painting if you don't have rich darks. All right, so a little bit more of this dark greeny brown color at the bottom, and then I'm going to come up this next section and just kind of make sure I mess it up on both sides of that section line. And again, I'm using the corner of the brush and scooching up that section line and making sure to mess it up on both sides. And I want to make sure I've got nice dark color on here because this is the real shading that's happening on our pumpkin.
Right now, I would say, Andy, this pumpkin has seen better days.
Oh, absolutely. It's looking tired and it's looking worn out. I think this is a little bit beyond tired.
You're going to make it look fabulous in just a couple of moments. I know.
It won't take long, but I'm just coming back and really establishing some of this dark by adding a little bit more of this greeny brown color here and there on the pumpkin, because I want to make sure that I've got plenty of dark, because as I mentioned, you can't have nice highlights if you don't have grown, everybody, dark shadows. I'm here all week.
All right, Andy, question about your brush, because you're really kind of putting pressure and scrubbing and you're using the corner. A question came in, does the brush get messed up?
Not really, not enough. I mean, this linen canvas is not, it's not abrasive, so we're not really doing that much damage. And these brushes, you know, you want a brush that's got a good quality bristle in it, not something that is, you know, I would not be doing this style of painting with like a very fine natural hair brush, but this particular synthetic brush it's rough and tough, so it's good to go. All right, so just keep adding and making sure that I've got lots of good dark on here. So I'm thinking that's probably good enough for right now. So there is your diseased pumpkin.
It's kind of scary at this point, at this stage.
It's not the most appetizing pumpkin you've ever seen, but certainly it's pretty cool. And I do love that this particular painting has almost no detail in it whatsoever. So it is a nice, fun way to paint, and you're not bogged down with details. When you look at this painting, without any question, you know it's a painting of a pumpkin. And that's really all your audience needs to know. All right, I'm going to take a moment and really dry. I mean, this paint is dry to the touch right now, but I want to take a minute with either your heat tool or a hair dryer and just really make sure that this is pretty dry. Okay, I know everybody is caught up with me and you are ready to go on to the next step. So while we're all together and all caught up, we're going to start painting our leaf. Now, I'm using the word paint the leaf very loosely. We're going to put some color on a leaf shape, and that's what this is all about. So I've got my Thicket with a little bit of burnt umber in it. This can be a little greener than what we did down here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically paint in the center vein line of my pumpkin leaf. So you could do that. Just stand the brush on the chisel edge and don't put a lot of pressure on it, and draw that line, that center vein line. Now, on the left-hand side of the center vein line, once again, tip of the handle in the palm of my hand, grip the brush on the back side, I mean, as far back on the handle as I can. And on the left side of the center vein line, I'm going to begin to lightly kind of fill in the leaf shape. And I might need to pat a little bit of paint right out at the edge to get the leaf shape to show up. All right, so there is the dark half of my leaf done. And when I say dark half of the leaf, the left side of the leaf. All right, now I'm going to put out a small amount of medium yellow on my palette as soon as I get my bottle of paint ready to pour out. All right, so a little tiny bit, we're not going to use much yellow right now, but I'm going to pick that yellow up, and of course I've got yellow all over my finger now, but that's okay, we'll clean that off. And on this finger too. Whew, what a mess. All right, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow on the brush, and I'm going to come in here to this puddle of paint, and I'm making a different shade of green here. It's a little bit of a yellowy green, but it's definitely not a bright yellowy green. And so on the right-hand side of that center vein line, I'm going to scrub some of this lighter yellowy green color on, and you can see that it's a different color than anything we have on our painting so far. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more Thicket, a little bit more medium yellow, and a little burnt umber that's here on the palette. And we're going to kind of very lightly stroke on the right side of this pumpkin leaf and scrub some color in there. And I'm turning my canvas just a little bit so it's easier to kind of finesse that edge a tiny bit. All right, so I'm just cleaning off my brush on the canvas. Done. So we've started our pumpkin leaf. And I'll give you a moment to catch up on that because I know we added medium yellow to our palette and we need a minute to paint that in. So everybody just take your time. Don't take your time. Go ahead and get that done pretty quick. Nobody has time to be taking, but we're going to come back and we've got lots more to do on this leaf. So don't think we're finished, but we're about halfway there. So I know you're about done with that. So I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And I'm going to put out some hot saffron on my palette. And I'm picking up my number 6 flexible metal blade palette knife. And we will be doing a lot of this pumpkin with our palette knife. But the first thing I want to do is to take a big portion of my hot saffron, and to that I'm going to add a smidgen of burnt umber. So I've got hot saffron plus burnt umber here. And what we are looking for is a like a dark orange color. So when you add your burnt umber, add it very sparsely. You might need to add it a couple of times, but better to add a couple of additions of burnt umber than too much all at once, because we don't want this brown. We want it dark orange. Hope I'm making myself clear. All right, so I'm going to give you half a minute, maybe not even half a minute, to make that dark orange color. And this is going to be a great addition to your fall decor or your holiday Halloween decor. So I hope that everyone is already purchasing Halloween candy so they have enough for themselves to eat before Halloween, because you don't ever just want to buy candy for Halloween night. You want to buy enough to last yourself all month long. All right, we are ready to move on to the initial stage of our pumpkin. So I have my 1-inch brush that I've just wiped on my paper towel, did not clean it in water. Oh, BJ, I think buying candy for yourself is the best thing you can do around this time of year. And always get yourself the good things. Buy yourself the full-size Snicker bars, and you can just say, oh, I'm just gonna have a little Snickers. And you eat your full-size Snicker bar, and you've got the little fun-size ones to hand out to the kids. But you eat the full-size one and enjoy every bit of it. And never, ever buy the tiny Reese's peanut butter cups. If you have to go to the fridge, take them out and unwrap them, you might as well have a full one. It's the same effort. So always get the big Reese's cup. All right, so I've picked up a little bit of my dark orange on my flat brush. And once again, put the handle of the brush in the palm of your hand and grip the brush as far back as you can. This is going to make you paint in a much more relaxed, casual manner. So I'm going to start right next to the pumpkin stem, and there's a little baby section there. And I'm using the corner of my brush to just kind of draw on the very outside edge of that section. So there you can barely see it, but right here, I drew on a little bit of an orange section there. It may not show up too much there, so I'm going to do it again and see if it shows up a little bit more. All right, so there's a little bit of that orange section, and that's all I'm doing there. Now, I'm picking up a little bit more paint, and when I pick up a little bit more paint, I guarantee you it's 10 times less paint than you think you need to pick up. I paint with a very, very dry brush, almost no paint. And I want you to get to doing that, because that's what allows us to have this beautiful texture that you see. All right, so I'm moving to the outside section of the left side of the pumpkin. And once again, holding my brush as far back on the handle as I can. I'm using the corner of the brush and just kind of drawing on the outside edge of the pumpkin. Now, do not ever think that this is a straight or smooth line, because it is neither straight nor smooth nor even. It's kind of all over the place there, but that's the outside edge of my pumpkin. Now, I'm going to take that brush loaded the same way, and I'm going to sweep some of this rusty dark orange color across the section of the pumpkin, and I'm not going to fill it in at the bottom. That's the dark green with just a little whisper of orange over it. But you could see kind of where I've got a bit more orange on some parts, less on others. But that gives me a rusty foundation for that section of pumpkin. So do that. And I'll give you a moment to realize that you've been putting too much paint on your brush and you need less paint. How do I know that that's what you're doing? When you all post your class projects and use the hashtag, I know that Felicia and Chris are putting the hashtags in the comment section. When you use those hashtags, we look at what you've posted. And a lot of times I see that you're using way too much paint. So that's why I'm telling you, you don't need as much paint as you think you do. All right, now that you're realizing that, we're going to go on to our next section. So very small amount of paint. And I'm moving to this next section right here. And I'm going to hold the brush as far back on my handle as I can. And we are going to use the corner of the brush and we are going to draw that section of the pumpkin on. And once I've drawn that outside edge of that section, I'm going to take a very small amount of paint and I'm going to begin to kind of brush and wisp this dark orange color into the section of the pumpkin. And I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom of the canvas because that's where we've got a dark green down there and our pumpkin's just disappearing into that shadow. All right, so I'm just scrubbing a little bit of this dark orange all over the pumpkin. There we go. So that's what it looks like right now. Kind of a dull mess, but we're not done. We're going to brighten this up. So this right here, what you see there is our dark shading. So it looks like I've spent a lot of time really shading this pumpkin to get all this dark in there. And you know, we scrubbed that color on pretty quickly and we're definitely not spending a lot of time with this dark orange. So I'm picking up a little bit more of that dark orange on my brush. And when I say a little bit more, it's still less paint than you think needs to be on there. So we've got this big section of our pumpkin. So let's just use the chisel edge of our brush to define the left side of this section. And again, holding your brush as far back as you can. It causes you to paint in a different way. Trust me, I cannot stress this enough, but wisping paint all over the pumpkin, I'm coming back to the center section and we're scrubbing some of this dark orange onto the center section. And I'm going to turn the canvas a little bit and I'm going to establish the right side of this center section of the pumpkin. Letting it fade off down there and then scrub, scrub, scrub. I'm putting a little bit of this dark orange onto the pumpkin and scrub, scrub, scrub. Turn your canvas, you're going to get marks in a different direction, which is what you want. We're really just cleaning this brush off on this big center section. We've got to get a little bit of this rusty color right along the top. Sweep, 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 rust this on there, that dark orange, scrub, scrub, scrub. And we are establishing the big center section of our pumpkin. And now I'm going to take a little bit of that rusty color that's on my brush, maybe add a little bit more to the two sections to the left, not everywhere. Not the same amount of paint. And I'm going to make maybe a little bit of a more concentrated rust color up here at the top. Scrub, 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 soften it in there. And I'll bring this up for a close-up in just a second. And I'm going to do the same thing on this far left side section. And so I'm going to get this done and then show you what this looks like up close and personal. It ain't pretty, but it's dark orange. And you can still see some of the linen canvas all the way through everything I've done. We're still not solid. and we don't have orange all the way down to the bottom of the canvas. So I'll hold this up here for a moment while you all are working on this. And I'm going to give you a whole minute to do that section and then add a little bit more over here. Better to start off very sparsely than to get too much on at the onset. So, well, I was going to ask a question while you all are painting, but probably best to let you all continue to paint. We'll just chat a little bit. Have you all purchased pumpkins and carved them?
Andy, I'm thinking it might be a little early to carve them. It's still a couple weeks out, right?
Well, I believe me, you know me, Chris, I'm not buying a pumpkin and carving it. So I don't know how early too early is, but I
Well,
do
you
know
don't want
that.
it, you don't want it to get moldy before it's time.
Well, apparently now you're not supposed to use bleach on your pumpkins because critters eat the pumpkins and they shouldn't be eating bleach. So you're supposed to use, I don't know if it's, I think it's peroxide or vinegar.
Well, and I also learned that you're not supposed to carve your pumpkins from the top anymore. You're supposed to carve them from the bottom and then set the hollowed pumpkin over on top of your votive candle or your pillar candle.
Well,
Apparently the pumpkins last longer.
Well, you're probably not supposed to use a real pumpkin anymore. A real candle anymore. Probably has to be a battery operated one. But I remember when we had a friend from Scotland was talking to us about early Halloween traditions, and she shared with us a picture of what kids used to carry on Halloween, which was it was not a jack-o'-lantern, it was a jack-o'-turnip, and they carved these big old turnips and still had the leaves on them. So that's what they carried around with a real candle in them. And the picture she showed of the carved jack-o'-lantern / turnip was the most terrifying thing I think I've ever seen. It's just crazy. All right, so once again, a little bit of our dark orange on here, and we're moving on to the right-hand side of our pumpkin. So again, not have too much paint on your brush, and we will start holding the brush as far back on our hand, on the handle as we can. Do a little bit up here at the top of the pumpkin section, just with the corner of the brush, and then use the chisel edge of the brush and just scooch down a little bit, and then we will lightly scrub on some of our dark orange color into that section of the pumpkin, and we will let it fade out before it gets down to the bottom. So scrub, 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 using not much paint. All right, so that's what that next section looks like. So this, even though haven't done much to it, it's starting to look like a pumpkin. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit more color on the brush, and I've got 2 more sections to do. So once again, the next section over to the right, add a little bit at the top of the section, and then with the chisel edge of the brush, kind of haphazardly scooch that on, and then we'll lightly scrub and brush some of this dark orange color into that section, letting it fade off before it gets to the edge of the canvas, or at least down to the bottom there. Can go a little bit off the edge, no problem. All right, so there's that one done. Don't worry if you've got dark spots and light spots showing, that's perfectly fine. This canvas, this pumpkin's got lots more to happen to it. And we've got one more little section up here that's kind of just tucked in next to the stem. And there's that right there. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute to bring your pumpkin up to this level, and then we will be ready to move on. And I'm going to take a moment and dry what I have on here. Okay.
Andy, as you were drying yours, I'll just share with you that lots of comments have come in about carving or not carving, and many people have already said that theirs have already been carved and they're shriveled up already.
Okay.
And then of course in Chicago, where it's only 40 degrees, they are not shriveling up.
Okay, well, it's nice to have a jack-o'-lantern report. Once again, I will not be joining the jack-o'-lantern brigade this year, but that's just me. All right, so I've got like a 3/4 inch flat brush, and we are turning our attention now to our pumpkin leaf. So I'm going to take a little bit of Thicket, a little bit of medium yellow, and a tiny bit of burnt umber. Not going to need much burnt umber. Just want to make sure that this isn't too light too quickly. All right, so Thicket, medium yellow, and a little smidge of burnt umber. And this burnt umber keeps everything from getting too light and too bright, because, you know, my two favorite colors are dark and depressing. So anything that we can do to keep everything muted, I'm highly in favor of. All right, so what I want to do is start over on the dark edge of the leaf, and I want to make sure that I've got a color that's a little lighter than what's on there. And I just did a little test right there. So I know I need it to be a little bit lighter, so a little more medium yellow, Thicket, and just a speck of burnt umber. Don't want this to be too bright, but brighter than what I had. And so putting a little, there we go. I think you can see that mark I made on the leaf right there. All right, so I'm going to make a couple of pulls from the outside edge of my pumpkin leaf and kind of create the bottom edge of this leaf. And you may have to press and pull a few of them on, but what we're not doing is we're not covering up the darkness that we put on next to our center vein line. So let's brush mix this color. Again, it's Thicket, medium yellow, and just a tiny bit of burnt umber. And we are lightly pulling some color in from the outside edge of the leaf. And then we are going to take the same color and do the same thing on the right-hand side. Starting along the outside edge, we are just wisping some of this color on. And then we're just going to scrub a little bit inside the leaf. And here's the fun part. We're going to take our brush and we're going right next to that center vein line using the chisel edge. And I'm setting the chisel edge down and I'm scooching back and forth, creating a nice light area and pulling some of that away from the center vein line, sorry about that, creating a light area on our pumpkin leaf. All right, so I'm going to bring that up there, and hopefully you can see that there's a little bit brighter area right here, and we've added a little bit of light color or lighter color on the outside of the pumpkin leaf there and over here. It's really not well painted, not well defined, not terribly well established. But I'll give you a minute to catch up with your pumpkin leaf.
While either you're allowing them some time, Andy, let me share with the class that Plaid has another Michael's class scheduled for the 24th of October. That will be next Monday night, and that will be taught by Tanisha Jones, and that will be a special Spooky Treats canvas. And then on Tuesday of next week, Kira Ballantyne will also be teaching another pumpkin type project. So be sure and check the Michael's calendar of classes and sign up for those two as well. They're both free classes.
Very good. All right, so we've taken all that time and we're ready. My leaf is dry. And so what I'm going to do next is take a little bit of my medium yellow and some of my Thicket. And I'm loading the flat surface of the brush. So I want you to see how I've got that paint all over the brush and there's almost no paint on there. It looks like a lot, but there's not much there. And so I'm going to start in the middle of the leaf next to the center vein line. And I'm going to set my brush down and I'm going to scooch a little bit of this color on and spread it out. And if it spreads out easily for you, I know you have too much paint on your brush. It should take some effort. Anything good is worth working for. So I'm going to brush a little bit of that on. I'm going to show you what this looks like. This paint, and you're going to start to hear this phrase a lot over the next 15 minutes. We want our paint to cling to the ridges of the weave of the canvas. All right, so I'm going to hold that up and you can see there's a pretty good view of what that light color looks like, just smidged on, catching only on the top of the canvas weave. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, just wisp on a little bit of this light color, just collecting it on the top of the canvas weave. Okay, give you a moment to do that. And then folks, we are busting out the palette knife, which I know you cannot wait to start using your palette knife. So much fun. We're leaving our leaf with just the start of our highlights on there. So it's brighter on the right side of the center vein and on the outside left edge of the leaf. All right, we are ready to move on to our pumpkin. And this doesn't take long and it's not hard. You have to have the courage to just do it. That's, I think, probably the hardest part of this entire painting is just gathering your courage to jump in and do it. And remember, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. So I'm tapping my palette knife into some hot saffron, and then I'm going to continue to tap and pat this on the palette so that I remove some of the excess paint from my brush. It's only on the bottom of the palette knife and not on the top. See, the top has no paint on it. The bottom has orange on it. And what I'm going to do is start over here on the left side of my pumpkin, and I'm going to slide my palette knife down the pumpkin and hopefully not have too much paint. I'm going to take a little bit more off because I'm a little apprehensive here, which I should not be. Should just do it and be done with it. All right, so I'm going to start right up here at the top of the section, and I'm going to lay that palette knife down and sweep down along the the left side of my pumpkin. So I've got a little more paint at the top than I would like, but I'm definitely not pitching a fit. And you can see down here at the bottom, it's just kind of sputtered out, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so that is how we do this. Tap, tap, tap with our hot saffron, not too much paint on the palette knife. Set our palette knife down at the top of the section, apply pressure, and then swoop it down. Now, the next thing we're going to do is take our palette knife with the hot saffron on it, and we've swooped down the outside edge of that section. And the next thing I want to do is just smoosh, smudge, smear, scrape off, whatever you want to call it, a little bit of the hot saffron so that it kind of runs across that section down into that dark area we created. So not everywhere. And because I don't have much paint on my palette knife, I can rub my palette knife all over this painting and nothing's coming off because it's all came off right here. So not much paint, swoop it on, courage of your convictions, and let's go.
And Andy, if someone does not have a palette knife, could you make a suggestion for them?
Yes, I think you need to purchase a palette knife.
I knew
mean,
that was
that-
going to be your answer.
I mean, you just, if you're going to pursue any kind of painting, you need a good, flexible metal blade palette knife. If you don't have a metal blade palette knife, you might be able to use, heavens, this is going to hurt me to even say these suggestions. You could use, if you have a tongue depressor or a popsicle stick. Oh, somebody's saying that a credit card might work in a pinch. I would cut my credit card into the shape of a palette knife. See if we can show that shape off. There you go. Into a shape of a palette knife and try that. You could even try like a knife out of a to-go food order that has a plastic knife in it. But a palette knife is your key to success.
This palette
Nothing-
knife is available at Michaels and Michaels.com. I don't think it's a lot of money either. I think it's only like around close to $6.
Yes, it's not terribly expensive. And
Uh-uh.
if you don't lose it, it should last you many, many years. All right, excuse me, I'm moving on to the next section. Same load of paint on my palette knife. Gonna start up here at the top, press a little bit of this orange on. This is the hot saffron. Press a little on and then sweep down the pumpkin. Pick up a little bit more paint as I need it. Sweep down the pumpkin, and then I'm spreading this tiny bit of paint into the pumpkin. And there is so little paint on my palette knife, I can do this. It's not messing anything up because the paint's coming off virtually when I start to put it on at the top. I'm out of paint, and then we just spread out what we have. So this is kind of what we end up with. And some of you will be wishing you had a little bit more paint coming down the side there. And if you are among those people, you can definitely load your palette knife again and keep doing that. So there, I've put more paint down there, and I would sweep that into the section. All right, so we've got two sections with our hot saffron on, and we are now moving on to the big center section. Load our palette knife again with the hot saffron. Tap it off on your palette. Tap, tap, tap. And then we're going to sweep this on right down the left side of our section and push it in to the center of that pumpkin section. You're picking up very tiny amounts of paint, and we're just applying it and scraping it on. I'm going to do the same thing over here on the right side of this section. Not as much. I'm going to make sure I get some down into the pumpkin, but just a little bit over here on this right side. And then you see, I just keep picking up minute amounts of paint on my palette knife, and we scrub them on. And this is where you're going to start to pick up the weave of the canvas, and it's going to be a great texture there. Again, minute amounts of paint. Tap, tap, tap it off on your palette. And if you keep picking up tiny amounts of paint, you can control exactly how much layering you get and what coverage you get. All right, now we're moving on because I know you're picking up on what I'm putting down, and we are moving on to our next section. So swipe that color onto the right-hand side of the pumpkin section, and then we're smearing that or rubbing it in, scraping it in to the section of the pumpkin. All right, I'll hold that up for you to see. All right, now, next thing I want you to really pay attention to is on this particular section. Let me get a beautiful pointing tool out. You can see that I have a dark area and a light area. I'm not really thrilled about how that looks. So I'm going to cover that up with my hot saffron that I'm going to apply the same technique. But when we put this on and just kind of rub that in, you don't see that light dark section anymore. It's all gone just that easily. And yes, I did that super fast because it doesn't take much time to do this because we're sweeping this color on and we're leaving it alone. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of that hot saffron on these two little tiny back sections. And that's about all I'm doing there. Not much. Easy breezy. Now I'm going to dry this while you all are frantically finishing up your hot saffron on the pumpkin. Going to give you 1 minute to finish that up. And then we're going to turn our attention back to our pumpkin leaf. I'm just cleaning off my palette knife, making sure that there's nothing on it. No orange left over because we're about to do green on our leaf. So this is all dry, one layer dry. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of my Thicket and move it over here. And I'm going to add some medium yellow to that and just mix it in with my palette knife. And I'm all out of medium yellow, so I'm going to put some more out on my palette. And I'm making a nice lighter green color here. And what I'm going to do now is just check to see if my green color is lighter than what I had. It's almost exactly what I had before. So I want this to be lighter. So I'm going to take more medium yellow and add that to this because I want my color to be lighter than what's on there already. Okay, so make yourself a nice light green, lighter than your highlight that's on your leaf right now. I'll give you a minute to do that. I'm not going to give you a minute, I'll give you half a minute. And then you all know I cannot tell time. So what we're going to do with this lighter green color is we're going to pick it up on the back side of our palette knife, tapping it on the palette so we have a very small amount of color on our brush. It's not a brush, it's a palette knife, sorry. We're using it like a brush. So very sparse amount of paint on our palette knife. And I'm going to put this right next to the center vein line, and I'm going to sweep it toward the right. So set my brush down, my palette knife down, sorry. Keep thinking of it as a brush, and then we're sweeping that off to the right and then smearing it, spreading it out on our leaf, creating a light edge. So we're getting a highlight and some light color on the right-hand side of the center vein. And I'm going to take the same color, very small amount on my palette knife, and put some over here on the dark side of my leaf. So you can see I'm not putting a lot, it's very sparse, but it really does start to make that pumpkin leaf kind of pop a little bit. I want to move some of that up into my leaf a bit. So I'm just going again on the right side of that center vein, pressing it and spreading it out. Okay, I'm just going to show you something just for fun here. It's not required, don't have to do it. I'm going to take a little bit of Thicket and mix this in with this lighter green color here, just making a darker green, and a little bit on my palette knife. And if I were to want this to be even more painterly, I could take this color and just kind of spread it on and let it go kind of outside my leaf. So you could see up above the leaf where some of this goes out there. So if you get some where you don't want it, it's not a bad thing. It could be a very effective way to just extend some color here and there. We will be doing this in just a minute, but just wanted to show you that on the leaf. So let's continue with our leaf and take some medium yellow on our leaf and add a tiny bit of green to that. Mix it up here on my palette, tap, 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 mix, mix, mix. And I'm picking up a very small amount of this color on my palette knife. So it's a very light yellow green. And I'm going to put it to the right of my center vein and blend that out. Okay, so now we've got a really nice highlight popping on that leaf. So we're leaving our leaf alone. And we're returning our attention back to our pumpkin. So when we left our pumpkin, we had just put on some hot saffron. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take some hot saffron and I'm going to add to that some medium yellow. So we're making a lighter orange color than hot saffron. And I absolutely love the way that I can take my FolkArt acrylics and mix them together and create different values of color, different tones, tints, shades. I can alter the colors to make them exactly what I want or need. And I'm just adding a little bit more medium yellow just to brighten this up some. So I want a nice, and I hate to say it, I wanted a nice pumpkin orange. So all kidding aside, I've got a nice orange color here. And I am going to pat, pat, pat my palette knife on the palette to load it and make sure that it is sparsely loaded. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start right back over here on the left side of our pumpkin. You can see that these three sections have a lot more highlight than the rest of our pumpkin. So we're going to tap, 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 and we're going to start right where we did before and swoop that color down. This is our kind of our pumpkin orange color. So you can put that on your palette knife and swoop that down. Then load your palette knife and move on to the next section. And this is what I was saying is it doesn't take long to do this if you get your palette knife loaded correctly. So we've done two sections, still picking up a small amount of our pumpkin orange, coming onto this big section here, and we stroke and we sweep that color on. Ooh, there we go, sound effects and everything. It really is not difficult painting once you catch on to what a small amount of paint you need on your palette knife. Now over here on the darker side, I am going to put a little bit on, but I'm not putting much on. And like for this second section over here, I didn't even add any more color to my palette knife. So you could see brighter, 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 not so much, not so much. And those little tiny sections next to the stem. And I'm sorry, it's 5 o'clock and our hour's up, but we're going to keep going until we're done. And we don't have that much more to do, so don't fret. A little bit up there. All right, now I'm going to dry this real quick while you all are catching up, because I'm sure some of you have fallen a little bit behind, but you're going to catch up. All right, now I'm going to take this light pumpkin orange color and I'm going to add some more medium yellow to it. We're going to make a much brighter orange color. So this is going to be a pretty light orange color. I don't want it to all be yellow. It needs to have some orange in it, but it's much, much lighter. And I keep cleaning my palette knife off so that I'm being neat and careful with that. All right, so I'm loading with my light orange color. Tap, 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 pat, pat, pat. Get that excess off. And I'm going to start here on the main section here, because this is going to be a big bright highlight that's going on. So right along that left edge of the center section, we're swooping, and we're pushing this back. Pick up a little bit more paint, push it back. Okay, look at what a bright highlight we've got going on there, and it really helps to make this section pop. A bright highlight, and you see that dark shading that we've got there really makes that highlight sing, and that's what we want. So we're going to do the next section over, sweep that color on, push that color back. Outside edge, start at the top, sweep that color on, push that color back. And we've got beautiful highlights now on those 3 sections. I have a little bit of paint left over, so I'm going to put some over here. And that's all I'm doing on this right side, just cleaning out the paintbrush, the palette knife. Again, anything I'm applying paint with is my paintbrush. All right, so last thing we're going to do on our pumpkin, I'm going to put a little white out on my palette. And I'm going to take some medium yellow and some titanium white, mix those together, and then add some of that light orange color. So I want this to be really light and bright, and the addition of a little white to our color is really going to make this so super bright. And add a little more yellow to that because that was looking a little chalky, and we don't want that. We want just a super light, bright, yellowy orange color. And I'm going to make sure I don't have too much on my palette knife. And we're going to come right onto our main section of our pumpkin, main center section. And we're going to add and push back a little bit of our light highlight on there. And I'm going to put a lesser one on the second section over here to the left. And a little bit on the far left section. All right, so when you look at this now, we've got really bright highlights on these 3 sections, and that's making our shading look even darker. We haven't come back and added any darkness or anything else down here since we started, but these bright highlights you don't get without the dark, and the dark looks darker when you get those highlights on. So that is your takeaway for the evening, but we're not done, because I'm going to take this light yellowy whitish color, and I'm going to put a little on my pumpkin leaf right next to the center vein and push that out there. So now we've got a really nice bright highlight that's got a little yellow, teeny bit of orange in it, and our leaf is done. Whew, it's a lot of painting to do, but you all are doing such a great job. I can't wait to see your finished pumpkins. So we're going to paint in our pumpkin stem, and you could do this right along with me. I'm using about a number 12 flat brush, and I've got burnt umber on my brush, and we are going to paint this all the way through. So hopefully it will still be a little bit wet when we put our highlights on. So I'm going to come in here and just use the brush to paint on the pumpkin stem, and it is burnt umber by itself. We're not adding anything to it. Just right down around those little sections, filling it in solid. And I know a lot of you love painting Halloween and painting pumpkins and things like that. And I will tell you, I don't spend an awful lot of time painting my pumpkin stems. I got a general way I do them almost all the time. So I start with a dark undercoat, and then I use the chisel edge of my brush, and we tap on some highlights. So I am rather quickly filling in my pumpkin stem, and it doesn't matter if it's completely filled in or if you can see a little bit of the linen canvas showing through, that's perfectly fine. But they are kind of lumpy and craggy stems, so they're not perfectly straight. That we are simply just filling that in with burnt umber. And I just use the chisel edge right down to the bitter end of this. We don't need to be getting out small brushes. Nobody needs to use the number 2 flat brush or a liner brush on the end of this stem. That's not going to help anybody's cause. It's not going to make your stem any prettier, and it's not going to make people wonder what it is, they'll know it's the stem of a pumpkin. If you've got a pumpkin with a stem sticking out of it, they know what it is. You don't have to hit them over the head with the detail. All right, so there is my little craggy pumpkin stem undercoated with burnt umber. I'm going to wipe my brush and I'm going to pick up some of that light green color that we used on our leaf. Don't want too much paint on the brush, but we are going to start using the chisel edge of our brush, and you can see exactly what I'm doing there, just scooching on a little bit of a highlight. If you run out of paint, you can pick up some more. It's pretty simple, and it gives a really nice woody texture to the stem. And some areas will be lighter and some will be darker, and that's exactly what we want, some variety. Always want some variation. And the reason I'm using a green to highlight this is because I don't want my pumpkin stem to look like it is completely dried out and dead, like some of your jack-o'-lanterns that are already shriveling. This pumpkin still got a little bit of life in it. And who knows, this could be the great pumpkin. All right, so we've got some green on there. That's kind of what it looks like. And I'm going to add a little bit of white and a little bit of my really pale highlight color there. And I'm brush mixing this in with my green, and we will add a little bit of this onto the stem. Not everywhere. We want some variety. But we also don't want our pumpkin stem to take away from the overall painting of the pumpkin. So the most interesting part of the stem is like kind of close down to the pumpkin itself. So I've got some highlights on there. And now I am going to wipe my brush because I want to really see if I can get a nice chisel edge on this. And I may not. If I have to break out a smaller brush, I will. But I'm going to take my green color and I'm going to start on my leaf and use the chisel edge and create a really light center vein. And then that's going to come down, and we are scooching that into our pumpkin stem. So you can see right where that joins and comes out and flows right up into our leaf, giving us that center vein. I'm going to add a little bit more light color to that, just to make sure that it really stands out. So you can see that light center vein, and we'll bring this down around and make sure that we get some highlight on there so we can really see that against the background. All right, so there is our little stem coming up to join its leaf. And that, my friends, is our pumpkin tonight. Of course, I turned my back on it for a half a second and I have to add something more. Just adding a little bit more highlighty to that. And I promise I'm putting my brush down right now so I can't add any more to it. But we've now created a very moody little pumpkin. And I hope you all had fun with me. I think it's a great little painting, very fun technique to do. And once you learn how to load that palette knife, this goes so fast. So anyone, thank you all for joining us this evening. And I want to thank you for painting with me tonight, and have fun until we see you next time. Bye-bye.